Good morning, everyone. Just giving this a minute to make sure we're all loaded. Thank you so much for joining us this morning on our Trade and Tariff weekly call. My name is Jonathan Friedman. I'm President and CEO of World Trade Center Utah. I want to make sure that you are all well aware, I know most of you are, but of our tariff dashboard that we work hard to meticulously maintain. It's on our website, wtcutah.com. We're proud to host this weekly trade and tariff update. And as always, privileged to have Troy Keller, partner at Dorsey and Whitney, and also policy advisor at World Trade Center Utah with us, along with Grayson Mann with the Utah China's Business Council. They'll both be sharing insights today, and as always, really grateful for their expertise. With that, why don't we let them get started? Then we'll have a question and answer that you can load in to the Q&A portion of this webinar.
Awesome. Jonathan, thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks again to World Trade Center for hosting these. They have been, I've heard, I think many of us have, how well received they've been in the business community here. The dashboard, people should continue to refer to it, check it every day like I do. There have been no new executive orders in the past week. So I'm not going to put it up on the screen today, but reminder that July 9th is coming soon. So what we will do is look at talk for a minute about updates on the negotiations that the U.S. is having with a number of other countries at the moment. I'll cover a few of the smaller countries, and then Grayson will do a deep dive into the U.S.-China situation and a little bit of the background there, and also what's happening currently, and some views on the outlook, which I'm really excited to hear about. In terms of the rest of the world, and actually before that, let's talk about Utah too for a second. There was a good article in the Desert News the other day that many of you may have seen that sort of described sentiment here in the state on tariffs, and it was interesting. It noted that nearly half of Utahns are less likely to make a major purchase like buying a home. And however, 40% reported that tariffs would not impact large purchasing decisions. And also interesting, about 50% reported being satisfied with how Trump has handled the tariffs. And I think that this is just Troy Keller speaking. I think that kind of shows that reflects the fact that inflation has not really ratcheted up at this point. If it does, I think you would expect those views to change pretty quickly. But at the moment, I think people aren't feeling it just yet. Businesses, though, certainly are. Everyone's scrambling to try to figure it out. The U.S. participated in many negotiations at the G7 summit, so with the other G7 countries. That happened earlier this week. Some of it was cut short because of the Iran situation. But while President Trump was there, they did announce they'd basically finalized a UK-US trade deal that would eliminate tariffs on British aerospace and reduce some of those duties on automotive imports that were at 25% down to 10%. So a little bit of rockiness with Canada and the EU. The EU, I think the discussions have not been as productive as we'd hope. Trump, I think his comment was, we're waiting for them to make a fair offer. But you see certainly some signals by the EU that they want to be aligned with the U.S., especially with respect to the China-facing side of it, and maybe Grayson will comment on that. So I think there's definitely some outlook there. Another important discussion has been with Thailand, and it looks like that is moving ahead pretty well, but no finality other than, I think, kind of the UK situation, at least in this last week. Last thing I'll mention is on the IEEPA court, which we've been tracking as well in these discussions, those court cases. The update this last week is there was a Supreme Court hearing, which I didn't get a lot of press, but one of the cases appealed directly to the Supreme Court, or requested the Supreme Court kind of cut through and not wait for the appeals court, but just directly address it. That's pretty unlikely to happen. However, they did, have a have a hearing on that, and so we're waiting to see what the Supreme Court says and on that front. So with that, that is kind of the rest of the world update. And I'm going to now pass the baton to Grayson to do the U.S. China deep dive.
Thank you, Troy, and thank you to the World Trade Center Utah for having me today. Hello, everyone. Again, thank you too for joining. My name is Grayson Mann. I work for the U.S.-China Business Council. A little bit of an overview of what USCBC does. We're an organization based in Washington, D.C., Beijing, China, and Shanghai, China. And we work with both governments, the U.S. government and the Chinese government, to help find a common ground. Particularly during a time like this, we're incredibly active engaging the administration, folks on Capitol Hill here, and then in China, we're engaging the relevant agencies, the relevant ministries, I should say, not only whether it be trade related, but also, as we know, there are many ancillary issues that affect the trade relationship. Just this morning, I'll share an interesting insight about how the fentanyl tariffs that we're trying to work through, and especially on the China side, that brings in their Ministry of Public Security that is now openly saying that they want to work to make a deal. With that, if folks who know how secretive the Ministry of Public Security in any country can be to get these kind of public remarks, shows China's desire to continue to resolve tariff issues. But I'll get into my outlook momentarily on the optimism or pessimism on which way things could go. I'm leaning more pessimistic just to give a preview. But with that, we're working with US companies only to make sure that we advocate for your views when we're trying to find that common ground. So be excited to continue to chat with any companies on the line who are interested in talking more about how we can continue to advocate for your specific industry, your specific business. And with that, we're going to talk broad issues today. But if there are any questions specifically related to your business, feel free to raise your hand, put them in the chat. I'll monitor it and make sure that I can answer any questions. So on that, I'm excited to talk more about where we're currently seeing U.S.-China relations at the Council, some of my own personal views, and I feel like a lot of this may come full circle. Many of the issues that Troy just mentioned on tariff negotiations directly relate to what we're seeing on China. And then as we continue to see what I'll call a cycle, and I'll share that cycle now, it all continues to go full circle. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I hope everybody can see it. Just a little bit of a quick background on me. Again, I'm working in government affairs at USCBC, where again, I'm engaging both governments. And, quick background on me. I've worked in presidential administrations, have worked in business, and have lived in Beijing, Shanghai, and Shenzhen myself. So I'll go ahead and switch to our next slide. So I'll characterize the current state of US-China relations as having an interesting pattern, very cyclical, of where we see a pause, usually in any progress or in any de-escalation. And then that's followed by a call, usually between high-level leaders. Most recently, we of course saw the call between President Trump and President Xi Jinping. And that call then leads to a restart of negotiations. And that restart of negotiations, we've seen it happen in Geneva. We've seen it happen most recently in London. And with that, those restarted negotiations may sometimes see progress, but then it ends in that deadlock. And where I start to get into my predictions now, how I think that will play itself out in our current situation is, of course, we see a current pause. With that, we don't know whether or not we're going to get our desired de-escalation from the London talks. And I'll sort of dive deeper into some of the different talks and why they happened, what happened during them. And of course, we don't have all the details sometimes, so I'll give you as much as I can share. But then, of course, we saw a call that led up to that. And I think what we're going to need to see to get more progress. So, again, I know we're in a state of unpredictability. We're not sure where tariffs are going to go. We've seen the tariff detente or truce after Geneva, where current reciprocal tariff rates are set at 30% for the US, 31.8 to be exact. And then, of course, the 10% down in China. But then we have tariff stacking. So if you're importing goods from China, we still have tariff stacking. So whether or not your goods that you're importing are going to fall under any Section 301 tariffs that are going to be on the product, any Section 232 tariffs, or if you're an exporter and you've been affected by any current recent retaliatory tariffs from China, are still in place, whether or not it was the March 10% tariffs on agriculture or the 10% tariffs on things such as crude oil. Those were all in retaliation to U.S. trade actions, such as the IEEPA tariffs that Troy mentioned earlier. So these all are still in place. So in order to continue to see this de-escalation, we're likely going to need the high-level meeting between President Xi Jinping and President Trump that they both said that they want to do in person. And I'm expecting that may happen as soon as this fall. Whether or not it happens with President Xi coming to the United States and doing another Mar-a-Lago summit, or whether it's President Trump going to China first, we'll have to wait and see where the tea leaves fall. So then, once we get that meeting, we're going to get a restart in negotiations. And why I say this fall is because we have this deadline that you can see in the tariff tracker that Troy mentioned earlier of August 12th for current China tariffs. That's a little bit further from the other deals because the restart of negotiations for China happened after the Geneva talks. So with that, we have an August 12th deadline. That'll be a key inflection point. So if we're not able to see a resolution or a de-escalation before that, of course, we're going to need this high-level call to lead to further progress. And will this lead to a deadlock? I think there are a lot of issues that we're seeing now outside of tariffs that will help decide whether or not we're going to be in another deadlock. Those issues right now are rare earths for the US wanting to import more rare earth elements from China. On the China side, they have a laundry list of items that we could go through, mainly which right now they're bringing up chip export controls. I'll sort of share on the US China Business Council side. We just recently held our annual gala where we had keynote speakers such as Xie Feng, who's the current ambassador from China to the US, and he made sure to share that chip export controls are an important item. And by the way, some of these comments that I'll make are off the record, so can't be attributed to some of the speakers that I'll mention, but I want to share it because it's important to the context of how leaders in each country are viewing things. But when the ambassador mentioned chip export controls are high up on China's list, and it's one of the key things that they're expecting as a concession to any concessions they give on rare earths. Or whether, again, it's the export controls that they want to see from us, or even potentially geopolitical issues that are going to come into the foray in the next few months. We'll have to keep an eye on them. So what I'll sort of characterize these next few months as is trust building between the US and China. Both sides technically haven't given anything yet. There has been no official readout from the most recent London talks. We had brief readouts from Geneva, but as we saw, each side felt that the other did not agree to, did not commit to what, it did not implement what it committed to in Geneva, which led to London. So with that, each side is going to continue to feel the other out. There is mistrust. In order to continue to get out of this deadlock, we'll have to see actions from both sides. And the question right now that I would ask to both sides is who's going to give first? Will China start to export more rare earths first, or will the US relax its export controls first? So I'll share a little bit of what I'm hearing from businesses, which is that they are at least seeing the news that their export controls that have been put on them in recent weeks. So if anyone remembers, there were is-informed letters that were sent from the Bureau of Industry and Security here in the United States to whether it be jet engine part suppliers or producers, whether it be ethane exporters, or whether it be EDA, so EDA, electronic design automation software, which is used to build semiconductors. All of those industries in recent weeks received letters from the Commerce Department's Bureau of Industry Security saying that you can no longer export your products to China. This was used as a leverage technique leading into London, but it will be a key item that we'll need to see companies be able to export their products again and to have their is informed letters either said you can continue to export or to sort of to see again commerce allowing these exports that were planned to go. That'll be a key item for the US to have these companies export those controlled items to China again, which, by the way, weren't previously controlled. So that was what was novel about those is informed letters saying that you can no longer export your products. Those were previously items that weren't considered of national security. Again, ethane, semiconductor software, and others. So in order to continue to see this deadlock end, we'd want to see progress on commerce allowing those shipments to go to China. On the China side, we're going to need to see progress on them releasing their rare earths. And specifically to the challenges that we may see here is many of these rare earths have military applications and dual use. Will China allow those dual use rare earths to be released? This is something where we're currently in a holding point. There's been again no official statements from either government on actually relaxing these, but there have been media reports. And in speaking to companies, there's also still in this middle space. Again, much may have happened. This is something where it changes hour by hour, day by day. So we'll have to see whether or not this does change. I think I see a question here in the chat. The question is, do I know if the Iran conflict will have or is already having an effect on trade negotiations with China? Again, this is something that's changing daily. While I don't have anything exact on how it's affecting it, we have seen China come out and support. And I shouldn't necessarily say support. I would want to read over the press release, but we do know the allyship between China and Iran. And again, I don't want to say support. I would have to read over the press release from this morning more deeply, but they are condemning the actions from a Iranian perspective. So with that again, these geopolitical tensions will not help this deadlock. Some other things that I'm going to get into on this deadlock, I'm going to go to the next slide here, is so much has happened in Trump 1. So this is just a quick table that I like to share of everything that's happened. But these challenges, and again, no need to focus too much on this. I'm going to go to a slide that focuses just on what we've seen in the last 6 months. Again, go to the tariff tracker that you all already have. But when we look at this and we look at the reds and the blue dots on this, the red and the blue dots on this are proposals to take tougher actions or those actions actually happening. And then the white dots that you'll see are the actions to decrease tariffs or lower tensions. A lot more red and blue dots on here than white dots. Again, the most recent white dot that we would have would actually be London talks, but again, we also have the Geneva Agreement, which actually reduced reciprocal tariffs. So all of these Section 232 investigations, de minimis duty rates, which again, we need to continue to keep an eye on some of the issues that are ancillary to tariffs. We could add so many things to this. There is a lot happening that are restrictive trade tools that are being used by both countries, which leads us to the point where there is a lot that needs to be done in order to get out of our deadlock, to get out of this cycle that we're in. But at the same time, some of these issues may be seen as national security issues to both countries. So how do you get across a national security issue that has now become a tool or has now become a reason to have a restrictive trade action? So I'm going to share one thing again. These comments can't be attributed, but we also recently, just 2 days ago, spoke to Governor Huntsman. So again, excited to have our Utah experience and our Utah connections for the U.S.-China Business Council. And what Governor Huntsman shared with us was that probably one of the most likely ways to be able to solve this. Again, he wasn't necessarily sharing ideas of right or wrong or which way it will go, but he shared what he knows with his deep diplomatic experience is we need to set aside a lot of these items, the items that are national security that we won't resolve, and find issues that can bring both countries together. Some of those issues may be agricultural purchases as they have been in the past. So I would say something that's key to the Trump administration is the Phase One agreement. Will agriculture be a part of any future negotiations? Because at this point, again, we're currently discussing and negotiating restrictive trade actions rather than actual trade itself, unfortunately. So, what are going to be those items that we could bring in as positive items that we could work together and find a common ground on? We want to get to that point. But again, you see all of these items that some of which may be considered national security. When you bring in a Section 232 investigation, you're talking national security. When you're talking shipbuilding, you're talking about the goals of not only the administration, but Congress. And you see shipbuilding on here again, that's not a tariff, but we've had restrictive actions on port fees that will raise prices as well. It will make it more expensive to import and export if you're using large container ships. And with that, how do we continue to resolve these items? Well, with this, there's other things that China has also brought in, which is showing that they're able to asymmetrically respond to U.S. actions. For instance, there's a phrase in Chinese, so if there are any Chinese speakers on the call, 杀鸡儆猴看, which in Chinese means to cut the head off the chicken to send a message. China's able to cut the head off of a chicken to send a message. If you're a large company that does business in China, making sure that you're able to continue to be able to respond to any potential Chinese actions is something to always consider. It's something we support our companies with. And I'm going to probably while I would want to focus on this a little bit more in the interest of time, I just want to share that the negotiations right now, I think there's a misperception in the US that there's a power imbalance on the US side. But China has showed us that they're able to respond asymmetrically. They're not just going to take restrictive trade actions from the US and back down. So China's not afraid, I think would be the one thing I'd want to share and that we've all seen. And I'll skip through to say when we're talking about these negotiations, what I was able to hear from on the ground in relation to Geneva is that there are two domestic camps and they're competing. One wants to continue to pressure America. So the harm that we were seeing to the American economy leading up to Geneva, there are significant camps in China that want to continue to put the pressure on the US. And then from there, there's also camps in China that won out and why we're continuing these negotiations that want that they don't want to hurt the domestic economy of their domestic economy in order to put pressure on the United States. So from that, I see that we're probably at about another 5 to 6 minutes. I really want to actually give folks time to ask more questions too. So thanks again, everybody. If I'm sort of just to conclude what I'm saying again, I think that one of the main things we're going to see here is a cycle, and there's many different things that will potentially be a challenge to getting out of this cycle. So while I'm pessimistic of the ability to get out of this cycle, there are things that can and could happen that could get us out of them. So thank you again, everybody. I know the unpredictability is challenging, and we're here to work through you all with this. And I would say expect the pessimistic end of this because there are so many things that are working for the pessimistic, unfortunately, options than the optimistic options.
Yeah,
Grayson, thank you so much for the presentation and all your work with US CBC. Uh, we appreciate your insights there. I know that there was one question from Rebecca in the chat about medical device exemptions.
Yep. And let's see, we're a med device vertically integrated with manufacturing of our own site in China. What exemptions do you forecast for medical exemptions? I will say, while this isn't my specific area of focus, I could connect you to folks within our organization who focus specifically on med tech. With that, I do know that if you remember in the Biden administration, there were bilateral talks on opening up the med tech market within China. Now, the direction of that, I would say, while those talks happened under the Biden administration, likely aren't continuing. So any of the potential positive actions that were coming from the commercial issues working group in the Biden administration have been paused. You probably can't even say commercial issues working group in DC at this point. So to see some of the exemptions in the med tech space, if there was anything that hasn't been committed to in the commercial issues working group, likely we're going to be starting from the beginning on those issues and renegotiating potential exemptions in the Trump administration.
Grayson, that's a question we get not just on the U.S.-China, but frequently there, but everywhere. Like, do we see? And the answer I know we've heard from USTRs that is a flat no, but then we do see exemptions still coming through in some of the executive orders. Anything you've heard recently that would lead you to believe that maybe there will be another, round of exemption opportunities that might be coming through?
So look at exemptions both from the China side and the US side. So if you look at the recent executive orders, there was Annex 2, which gave us exemptions in the recent round of tariffs. So those Annex 2 exemptions are important. And, I haven't heard much intel on how the administration views potential additional exemptions. I'd say there's an environment right now in DC where when we do talk to folks who are either career in agencies that are related to trade or political, there is either one of two options. And I'm not too sure which one it is. Either they actually don't have the answers to the questions when we ask about exemptions, or there's a political chain of command that's not allowing folks who aren't the top leaders, secretary level, to make those sorts of decisions or even comments. So I'll share what you'll get from if you talk to probably folks at Commerce or USTR2 is that they're not able to comment on the potential for exemptions at this point. And on the China side, I would say potentially a little bit more optimistic. They extended some of their tariff exemptions. I'd have to look to say the exact ones, but we know that there were their Section 301 retaliatory tariff exemptions. They're continuing to extend those. The list of those products is tough to find. So that's something where, while we can say that there are exemptions, you'll have to figure out whether or not your products are on that through dealing with Chinese customs directly. because that list hasn't been made public. But I will say, in advocating for exemptions in China, it is key to having not only a local partner that is importing your product that can speak on your behalf, but also to engaging with MOFCOM, the Ministry of Commerce in China. And with that, local government engagement and central government engagement is going to be key in getting any exemptions on the China side. So it's really product specific, almost for your specific business rather than industry wide, as we're seeing with some of the US exemptions. I'll sort of share just the story of US ginseng and working with US ginseng farmers here, working through their industry associations to then connect those industry associations to they already knew who they were working with in China, but then to the local government partners in Guangzhou. So with that, that is a process that I've seen to work through getting exemptions in China.
Yeah, I like it. I think we're out of time, but I will say that I have seen that my take on sort of how this all started last time around. Trump won. There was a lot of pressure from Congress, which led to an exemption process. I think USTR and in the White House tried to get ahead of that by just saying we're not going to do processes this time around. But you have seen, as you pointed, some of the exemption lists on the executive orders. I think just discussion I've had with people on the Hill, it feels like there is kind of a renewed sense of let's put pressure because all the companies are calling their representatives. Let's put pressure from Congress on the White House to reconsider those once we see where we are here in a month or two and how things shake out on because even if we end up at 10, 20, 30% tariffs, not as terrible as 150%, but still those are very painful and exemptions where it makes sense where it supports US manufacturing could make a lot of sense. I think there'll be some pressure to do that.
And Troy, I just want to reiterate and second what you said on the importance of reaching out to your representatives. And we've seen that actually be successful recently here in the U.S. Commerce. The Bureau of Industry and Security had a restrictive export controls package that they have been waiting to drop. This would be an export controls package that would make the regulations so that if a Chinese company has a subsidiary, that company would also fall under export controls, even though right now it would really just be the parent company falling under it. So with this new round of potential export controls, they would make subsidiaries fall under if a company was listed on the entity list. The subsidiaries would also fall on the entity list by default. And then it would also include additional companies added to the entity list. So we saw that potential for that. Congress saw the potential for that. BIS was forecasting it, and it was congressional representatives pushing Commerce and BIS not to do that. That actually led to what we're hearing through reporting is that the entity list and the export controls package will not be dropped anytime soon. So it was that pressure from Congress that they were likely pushing on BIS because of hearing from businesses like you all that led to this restrictive entity list and export controls package not being dropped. Also, the tariff negotiations may have played into that as well when we saw Lutnick go to the most recent round. There's a lot of speculation on what may have led to it, but that pressure is important. And I shouldn't even call it pressure, just sharing your business's story is important. And I see another question here. What will the Chinese tariffs return to if there's no resolution in August? I would say a likely extension of the current detente that we would have. So I would hope that we wouldn't see an escalation, but just if there's no deal, to continue to see the baseline that we have now going, so that 31.8% on Chinese imports on our end from reciprocal tariffs, and then stacking the tariffs on top of that, and then the 10%, and then stacking the other tariffs on the China side as well. That's what I would expect to happen if we're not able to have a resolution by August.
Yeah, the 55%. Yep, I think that's right.
Yep. The stacking of the other tariffs. Sometimes there's so many tariffs. If I say 55%, I worry I might be missing some out depending on the product. If you have a Section 301 or a 232, they can
Yeah.
stack various amounts. So, yep, the 55%, as the president said.
Well, with that, thank you so much. I think we're going to get people needing to drop off. We appreciate your insights, Grayson and Troy. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you all for being with us today, and we will plan on seeing you next week. Keep an eye on our tariff dashboard. I sent a link in the chat, wtcutah.com/tariffs, and we will continue to keep that updated for you. Again, thank you all.